Poverty and despair, like all things, are interconnected, especially in cities of developing nations. But could poverty be connected to hope by way of design?
Latin American capitals have this huge contrast between rich people and poor people. There's a lot of inequality. Cities have grown too fast. A lot of people coming from the rural areas into the cities in very short periods of time because they're looking for a job or they are trying to avoid the violence.
Bogota grew in 100 years from 100,000 persons to 7 million. So Bogota has grown in an illegal way.
10 or 12 years ago, Bogota was a disaster, really, because it lacked of infrastructure, of quality. There were security and safety problems. There was no optimism in relation to the future. The leaders of the city were very scarce, and they didn't know where to go, what to do. They didn't have a vision, they didn't have a model, they didn't have money to do things. And really the situation was very bad. The quality of life in Bogota was one of the worst in Colombia and in Latin America.
I have never known a city where the people hated their city so much as Bogota used to be. People thought it was the most horrible city. Even fourth-generation immigrants, they continued to say they were from the region they came from, but because they did not want to say they were from Bogota. It was a city that was really without hope and without self-esteem. And what is amazing is it really changed beyond all my expectations because people, and how did it change? Really because we started making a city a little more for people and not so much for cars. It sounds very simplistic, it's almost dumb, but the fact is that we are really trying to learn a different way of life.
In just 10 years, Bogota's murder rate fell 70%, from one of the highest in the world to less than that of Washington, D.C. It can be argued that this turnaround was due in part to the vision of former Mayor Enrique Peñalosa and his belief that sustainable urban design can be the foundation for social justice.
The way we created cities would really determine the way people would live and how happy they would be.
After seeing cities in Europe, Peñalosa said, "As a fish needs to swim, we need to walk, not in order to survive, but to be happy."
For 5,000 years, we've had cities, and for 5,000 years, all city streets were pedestrian only. When cars appeared, we should have at least decided that half the street would be for cars and half for pedestrians. Unfortunately, this was not done this way, and we have done environments which are very horrible, where children grow in fear of getting killed. I mean, and we think it's totally normal. Just tell any 3-year-old child, watch out, a car, and the child will jump in fright. I think now we are at a time where we can begin to correct that enormous error. So, at some point, if we want to make a city that is very nice to people, there must be some sort of restriction to car use.
We are here at the Avenida El Dorado, one of Bogota's main avenues, and we are in the Domingo Ciclovia. In Bogota, every Sunday, we close about 120 kilometers of main arteries during 7 hours, from 7 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. And we get more than 1.5 million people coming out. Rich, poor, fat, skinny, old, young. This is a wonderful place for integration. It's the safest place in the city. In 1982, a mayor called Augusto Ramirez put this into place. And since then, it has been growing more and more and has been better and better organized. I would say this is the seed of everything that has happened in the city afterwards, that we have made a city more for people and restricting car use. I think this was the beginning of the new Bogota.
We did not have public transport. We had some extremely chaotic bus system, almost individually owned buses, racing like crazy. They would stop blocking the 3 lanes of road so that the buses behind would not overtake them. They would dump people in the middle of the street. There were many accidents, buses even going out of the street into the sidewalk and killing people. So instead of doing this huge investment in elevated highways, we decided we're going to move by public transport.
It was a huge battle because the buses, the public buses in Bogota were in the hands of a mafia. So it's a multi-billion-dollar business. And then comes Peñalosa and said, forget it, I'm going to take away the biggest chunk of your business. This is going to be now a system managed by the local authorities.
So they were a very powerful political group which could also bring the city to a halt with a strike. And we were going to substitute them totally by the new system. So it was a big challenge, a bit of carrot and a bit of stick. We said, we want you to become and be part of the system, for the traditional bus operators to be the shareholders in the new system.
And in fact, there are some of those previous owners that, complying with certain rules and regulations and very tough ones, they can be part of the system. And that was intelligent to have them on board.
So we structured a bus system which we copied from the city of Curitiba in Brazil, and we improved it a little bit. Today is perhaps the best bus system in the world. We called it Transmilenio.
Transmilenio really shows a lot of what Peñalosa wanted to do, because Transmilenio is the public transportation system and it changes the city around it. So it makes public space for pedestrians around it, which is the main goal of Peñalosa's city model. And it has become like our, how do you say that, emblem, we identify Bogota through Transmilenio right now.
Clearly, you have to take into consideration these marketing issues. It's not just a matter of engineering. Public transport is not just a matter of engineering. We needed to make our bus system sexy. So one very important consideration was the color, the facilities, the design, and the name.
Transmillennium means going from one millennium to the next millennium. And since that occurred when Peñalosa was city mayor, we went from one millennium to another. That was 6 years ago, etc. He wanted a big name, just to have people believe and think in the long term, in big things.
We needed people to talk about Transmilenio and not about the bus. Because if we had people referring to it as taking the bus, we would not get upper income people into the system. So happily, no one in Bogota ever mentions about going to take the bus. Now they go to take the Transmilenio.